How's it going, everyone? Welcome to another iteration of Rogue Revolution, the series where we dig through the archives of One Piece leaders to try to uncover a new contender for the current format. This time, we'll be taking a look at the dynamic duo of Zoro and Sanji. First off, I present to you my current list for the deck. We'll be going over the card by card, and then I'll give you a brief overview of how the deck plays before we jump into some ranked games. For those of you unfamiliar, Zoro and Sanji is a green-blue 4-life leader with both the strike and slash attribute, as well as the straw hat typing. Despite being a duo, the pair has just one effect. When they have a Dawn attached and attack, you can return a cost 2 or greater character to your hand in order to restand one of your rested characters, as long as that character has 7,000 or less current power. In general, this deck is built with a focus on hyper-aggression, seeking to blitz down the opponent's life and mostly ignoring their board to end the game prior to the opponent being able to stabilize. The deck I have here for you today seeks to capitalize on the explosiveness this leader is capable of, while also allowing for a surprisingly robust grind game should the tides turn against us. Getting into the list, first up is of course our Searcher. Although Sanji only uses blades for cooking, having half of the card be slash is enough to satisfy Perona's condition, and so we'll be able to mostly be playing a slash attribute focused build. We have two primary cards that we'll be looking for with our Perona search, and that's going to be the 3-cost Mihawk and the 4-cost Cavendish. Obviously, you can't always start with this pair of cards in hand, however the games that you do tend to go in your favor more often than not. For whatever reason, most decks have abandoned ways of dealing with 4-cost characters on their forward on turn. Really, it's just Atmos in Ace that could potentially stall you out, and once that Cavendish starts to get rolling, it's going to be hard to stop him as he draws into more cards that you can then use to protect him. Aside from Cavendish, we have our second attacker in Tashigi. Obviously, we'd rather have a Cavendish in play most of the time, but specifically against Ace, because of the aforementioned Atmos as well as Jozu, Tashigi is often the preferable card to put in play just because she can protect herself once by arresting another card. Next up on the list are the Fishmen. We're really only playing these to get access to Vanderdecken, but Vanderdecken is an incredible tempo card for this format and a great reason to be playing Fishmen. As an on-play, you can discard a Fishman and KO any rested character, so for just 2 Dawn and 2 cards, you can get rid of something like a 7-cost Shanks or an 8-cost Kid on the turn that they came down. And so, to facilitate having a Fishman available in our hand, the rest of our 2Ks other than Mihawk are going to be Fishmen slash attribute cards. Like most 2Ks, these two are never going to be able to hit the board, but hey, at least they're searchable by Perona. And lastly, of course, we have the Hody Jones. Some games you're just going to need him to close things out. Of course, he can rest Dawn as well as blockers, but honestly, rarely are you going to need it just because of the amount of pressure that we're usually able to put on our opponent. They're going to have to give us resources a lot faster than normal. If you don't end up needing him, you can always pitch him though for Vanderdecken, so he never feels like a dead card in hand, no matter what matchup you're playing. Aside from the Fishmen, we have our suite of blockers. Did you know that Blue has 3 different slash attribute 1-cost blocker cards? Well, now you do. And we are going to abuse that fact by using any spare Dawn that we have to toss these guys out. It turns out that removal is scarce, mostly limited to just 6-cost characters and events, so you'd be surprised how often these little chump blockers really gum up the works of your opponent's turn. These characters are going to be how we're going to manage to keep our characters from getting run over by big bodies, as well as keep ourselves healthy into the late game. To round things out, we have some odds and ends. There's of course the 6-cost Luffy that restands for Dawn, provided that you are a multicolor leader, which of course we are. This is essentially a 2-cost 7k power character with double strike, and allows us to make use of our leader effect on the turn that we play it by playing a 2 or a 3 drop and then attaching a Dawn to leader, attacking with a character, attacking with leader, bouncing that card back, restanding the character we attacked with. You get the song and dance. Additionally, we have Vivi. She draws 2 cards on play, and using leader effect we can bounce her back to hand to draw another 2 cards, or potentially just save her for the turn afterward and use the rest of our Dawn to play some blockers, maybe Dawn up some swings, but either way, Vivi remains an incredible recovery card that will allow us to hang on in the endgame. Lastly, there is 2 copies of Ippon Matsu. He's another potential bounce target for our leader effect, and can boost the power of one of our slash characters to keep up the tempo as an on-play. Unfortunately, he's not slash himself, so he's not searchable, but we do have enough drawing that I usually find one of him by the end game, which is where he shines, giving our last couple of swings a little extra oomph to really get there. As you may have guessed, Zoro and Sanji can put out a huge amount of pressure early in the game. With an ideal opener, we can make 5 attacks by turn 3 when going first, and not just 5k attacks either, we're talking 6k or even 7k swings, and then you can drop a blocker or two as well to protect your rested characters. Obviously, you can't always get away with this kind of output, but on the games that you do, your opponent's going to be very hard-pressed to provide an appropriate answer. And of course, between Cavendish and Vivi, our ability to draw cards is second to none. There will be games I go from 1 card in hand to ending on 6 while also having gotten to pressure the opponent. And while we can try to close the game out as soon as possible, we can just as easily switch up the game plan and start targeting the opponent's board, made even easier by the inclusion of our Vanderdecans, because of course for 2 Dawn and 2 cards again, we can pop any rested card. In a simplified game state, if we win the board, the efficiency of our card draw and blockers is almost always going to be enough to choke our opponent out of the game. As for the drawbacks of this leader, there are a few. First off, there's very little synergy between our 2 colors, so oftentimes it feels like you have to just pick one and run with it. In my case, this ended up being basically just a green deck that's playing a couple of blue cards for access to slash blockers and card draw characters. And of course, if you ever play against a deck that has more efficient removal options, such as Sanji or God forbid something like a Sakazuki or Lucci, well, you can't exactly use leader effect to restand a character that doesn't exist anymore. And the last negative is possibly even a little ray of hope for the future. There are a few cards from EB03 coming in a few weeks which can be used to great effect in this deck, primarily the 2-cost Kuina, 2-cost Otama, and the 4-cost Tashigi. Otama and Kuina both have great activate main effects for 2-cost characters. You can rest Otama in order to rest one of your opponent's Dawn, and you can rest Kuina in order to attach 2 rested Dawn to either your leader or one of your characters. And so Otama is great for stymieing your opponent's defense on the last turn of the game, meanwhile Kuina is just a nice tempo option in order to keep your swings big without costing too much Dawn to get a character out of your hand so that you can get your restand effect out of your leader. And then, of course, the 4-cost Ashigi is just a nice 6k body that is a slash character, so it's searchable, and it does have a protection effect for itself, though at the cost of a card from your hand. With the amount of card draw that we have in this deck, a lot of times we could afford to pay that cost. For now, we are stuck using what we've got, but what we have is a pretty efficient package of cards with the potential to just run away with the game. And so, without any further ado, let's jump into the games and see what we can do with it. Well, here we are in Game 1 up against Boa, and we did win the die roll, so I'll go ahead and choose to go second. Of course, you want to take the even curve away from Boa when possible, just because a lot of their power cards do line up with the even curve. If they get to go something like the 4-cost Boa or Ran into a Kuma, it's a lot more powerful than if they do something like Marguerite into a Ran or 4-cost Boa. And so my opponent, though, they're just going to be searching for a couple of pieces. I do see they've got the starter deck Boa now in hand. I'll just go ahead and give my block up. I do want to stay at 4 life, if possible, just to try to keep my Cavendish safe from a Rayleigh that they may trigger out of life or even just play from hand. And so if they do play the 4-cost Boa, and they do, then they'll be swinging another 7. Now, fortunately, I do have a Mihawk in hand, so I can just go ahead and give that up, as well as a Tashigi in order to keep myself healthy, and then we can just go ahead and start swinging. If he wants to give me the Boa blocker, well, I say I'm all for it. I do pick up a Luffy here, and I'm really contemplating what I want to discard, because it's going to determine the whole overall pace of the game. I end up discarding the Luffy only because I do have this Mihawk play to play another Cavendish, and if we can have both of these Cavendishes stick around, it's going to be a lot of draw power every single turn. I mean, we're looking at 4 additional cards, and we get to keep 2 of them. And then additionally, if we happen to draw into a Vivi, you know, our card draw is just going to explode from there. Now, you do see he did trigger off a Boa, which allowed him to play a Rayleigh from hand, but fortunately we still had 4 life, so even though he gets a 6k body, it's not going to pop any of my characters. And so that's good for me. I'll just go ahead and play a blocker and bluff a Dawn. I know I don't have any event cards in hand, but the difference between a 6k swing and a 7k swing wasn't going to be all that much different from my Cavendish there. He is pressuring my bodies fairly significantly, though, and so I end up having to give it the blocker and then lose one of my Cavendishes anyway. Not a fantastic position to be sure, but we have some Cavendish draws. I'm really hoping to find a VV, and unfortunately I don't. I just get another Cavendish, but at least it'll be a body we can establish, and additionally we have a Vanderdecken plus a Fishman, so I can go ahead and spend that to pop this Rayleigh. Since Rayleigh is of course not a Kuja Pirate, I won't be losing any of my life cards in order to remove it, and from here we can just play the other Cavendish and have two Cavendishes standing. Again, if they both survive to next turn, we can look at 4 additional cards, and hopefully we'll find a VV and some blockers, and pop off from there to restore our hand back to a decent size. Additionally, our opponent's only on 1 life, well, now 2 because they played the Kuma. I was actually expecting them to play the 9-drop Boa, but thankfully they didn't have it, and they'll also show us their hand using the Gorgon Sisters, and we see they have 2 no-counter cards and a Slave Arrow, so a +4 card, and then an Unknown, probably a +1 if I had to guess, but it could be a 2K as well. Or even a no counter card. He'll just swing 5 with his little guy. I'll give him my card. I get a 2k to life, which lets me defend against the next 6k swing, but we end up going down to 2 life. He holds up his blocker only because he can go ahead and block one of my attacks, and I'll take the damage anyway when the Boa dies. So fair play on his part. Now that we're getting towards the end game, Boa shouldn't really care about playing or losing the blocker all that much. Now, if I were the Boa player, though, I would go ahead and block the first attack, only because I am drawing off these Cavendish swings. If I were to draw into a Hody Jones or, Dead Man's Game, some kind of effect like that, I could use them to tap down the Boa blocker as well as his Dawn, and suddenly that Slave Arrow becomes a stranded card. He has 2 no-counter cards in his hand in addition to that, and so with just 2 unknowns left, it's likely I can try to push for game were I to have drawn into those. Now you see as the viewer, I did not do that, and so what I'm going to have to do instead is just establish all the blockers that I drew into and try to live for 1 more turn. He does go ahead and give me the block on this leader swing, and from here I do get a 1k at least. I'll just go ahead and try to clear one of his Gorgon Sisters, only because, well, if I were to swing at life and he gets another trigger, it would spell disaster for me. This way I get to mitigate his swings enough that with only 4 attacks, he would need to burn my life, but the only way they have to burn in this deck is the 9-cost Boa. If he plays the 9-cost Boa, he cannot also afford the unblockable event, and so instead he's just going to play a Kuma and then continue to pressure my life with the rest of his cards. Now I do still have to try to play around the unblockable event as best I can, and what that means is that if he swings a 6, I'm giving him both cards, and if he swings more than a 6, then I'm going to give him a block immediately. I cannot afford to get caught with my pants down by the unblockable event. He can just go ahead and swing minimum now, and even tries to go for my Cavendish. I'm giving him all 3 blockers. That was never going to be a question. The question is, can I defeat him on my next turn? I am going to have a minimum of 4 attacks on my next turn, and he only has 2 life, and so if I hit him 3 times, I will win. I also knew 2 of the 3 cards in his hand. I still know 1 is the Slave Arrow, and he has no Dawn up, so it's a dead card, which means that for a 7k swing, he will be forced to either block or take the damage. He decides to block as he does already have a full board, so if he were to trigger a body out of life, well, it just wouldn't really do anything. Now, I do have, at the very least, a 2-cost character that I put into play. Not sure why I did that, actually, looking back at this. I probably should have just swung 9 and then 11 if I was thinking straight, just because, well, I could restand the other Cavendish by bouncing a Cavendish back to hand. I already did that this game. In any event, it was enough, and the 10k swing does get there. So that was what our deck does when going second, but what about when going first? We are up against the purple Doffy here in game number 2, and we are going first. So he does play Double Searcher to start, so we're going to have to chew through these. And additionally, Doffy is a very strong defensive deck, has the big capability to mitigate a lot of late game attacks by using their leader effect to redirect, and then additionally they have a baby 5 which could heal them as well, so I want to chip down as much as possible as early as possible. I did have a great start here. I had a Searcher into Mihawk plus Cavendish, and I also have a VV in hand which will allow me to draw 2 cards, and I draw into another Cavendish and a 6-drop Luffy. The 6-drop Luffy is going to be a huge boon to us, as if it ever does connect with its double strike, it's going to accelerate the pace of this game into overdrive. Now, I do have a blocker as well to defend this Cavendish in case he tries to swing big into it. Instead, he just establishes this Sugar, which on KO will allow him to play a 5-drop out of his hand, so one of my swings is going to get blocked by that. Fortunately for me, though, I'm going to be swinging quite a bit this turn. I will have 4 attacks between this Mihawk, plus the Cavendish, plus my leader, and then I can restand the Cavendish and go again. I am deciding what I want to discard here. This is my second Hody Jones, so I definitely don't want to get rid of it. Instead, I just go ahead and give up the Cavendish. So I'll probably draw into another Cavendish anyway, just in case I do need it. Because of the risk of the 10-drop Doffy, which can't come down this next turn, but the turn after that, every turn from then on, is going to be a risk of that coming down. Well, it does blank 3 of my attackers, so getting 4 attackers can be very important. At the very least, if he has at 0 life, then Hody can be a way to still get to game. But from here, we are just going to establish another Luffy, so we are now at that 4 attacker minimum that I want to be at. And additionally, I'll be able to draw a couple extra cards with this Vivi, and then establish a blocker as well, just to defend against this 9k Doffy. I do go ahead and swing the 7 into his character, just because I want to see if this 7k double attack is going to get through. Instead, he gives me 2 cards, and so we'll just go ahead and chip with a 5 and then a 6 and play this blocker down. If he had taken the double attack, I would have just gone everything in. Because I already have a Hody Jones in hand, I need to just start really chipping away as many cards as possible out of his hand. Since he has 1 life, though, I'm willing to not do that. And so we will go ahead and defend our character as best we can. He did get to reduce with this Virgo. A little bit annoying, but not the end of the world. I am suspecting that he will use this 4 remaining Dawn in order to play a baby 5. That's usually what they would do. But then he dawns up his Monet. So instead it's probably a counter event of some kind. Likely the rest 2 Dawn in order to rest one of my characters. And so I just go ahead and rest 2 of his Dawn so that he won't be able to cast that. If he wants to defend, he will have to block with his blocker. And so he does just that. Now, this is kind of a unique play that my deck is able to do, which is after I swing this Hody Jones, I can actually bounce the Hody Jones back to my hand for use on the turn after this. Now, he still uses his redirect in order to draw a couple extra cards with the Monet, or rather cycle. I don't believe it draws flat out, but it takes every single card out of his hand. He is able to live, though. Pretty good for me is I have plenty of counter power, so I'm not going to die. And even if he clears my board, which I'll even let him have a couple of the cards in play, not that big of a deal, I have the Hody Jones in hand, so I will be able to rest his blockers if he does play them. He only has 1 card in hand, so at most he could have 2 blockers, and then it will give me the necessary 2 swings that I need in order to go win the game. Now, he does leave the 2 Dawn up again, so this is likely another event. We'll just go ahead and go at him, and that is going to be the game from there. Following right into the third game is going to be against the red-blue ace deck, and we do have a very nice opening hand here. We have a Cavendish already plus a Searcher, and the Searcher digs through to find a Mihawk. Now, I won't play the other Searcher because with the Mihawk in hand, I can go ahead and play out the Cavendish, but only if I only had 2 or less characters in play when the Mihawk came down. So if I played the other Perona, I wouldn't have been able to use that effect. With it, though, I can swing 6 to pressure a card out of his hand, and then still restand the Cavendish so that it can't get attacked into. And so he will just go 7 at my leader after establishing his Yamato. Not a big deal for me, I can just go ahead and counter out. Now, I am looking for a blocker at this point. Getting a lot of blockers into play is going to be very important, and I'm trying to decide whether or not it would be better to use a Vivi to try to use this, or go for just a Cavendish swing and try to luck into it. Fortunately, my Cavendish does luck into it, although it is the one that doesn't gain blocker until after I have 4 or less cards in my hand. Hopefully, he doesn't go like 10 into the Cavendish, and then I have to give him 3 cards. But I would give 3 cards for a Cavendish, mind you. It would probably be my 2 2Ks and then one of the VVs. As long as you keep 1 VV in hand, you are perfectly fine. And having an Ippon Matsu against specifically Ace can be very nice. Wait a minute, did he just Honesty Impact me? What is he, playing Caesar Clown? Hey, that's the wrong red-blue deck, guy. Alright, well, it does end up being 3 cards out of my hand anyway, but Thankfully, we still have a Vivi so we can recover, and I'll just go ahead and draw with the Cavendish first, see what we draw into. I go ahead and get rid of the Ippon Matsu. I might end up needing this Hody Jones, and I don't know when the next time I will see another one is, but we can draw twice with the Vivi, in fact, and then still establish a blocker, see if he wants to give me the Yamato, and he does. That'll be very good for me in the event that he does have the Whitebeard to play, because now only his leader will get the benefit of the attached Dawn. Instead, though, he just plays a Jozu, bounces back my Cavendish. A little awkward for me, but we can make do. We even have another Hody Jones in our hand now, but fortunately I top deck this Luffy, so I was probably just going to establish a Hody Jones instead, because I am very healthy, and I have plenty of blockers to play from hand to go along with it, so I would not be in any risk of dying. Instead, though, we can just establish the Luffy plus a Cavendish, and then all three blockers, and the Pedros, who normally, you have to have 4 or less cards for them to be blockers, well, I have 4 or less cards in my hand, so we can just go ahead and use those first because we are planning to draw plenty more cards on our next turn. And so from here, I'm fully ready to just give the Pedro, but then he uses a Red Rock on my Luffy and swings 5 with the Garp, which I will just go ahead and take because I, again, don't want to get rid of Vanderdecken or Vivi. Vanderdecken could end up being useful in order to pop, of course, this Jozu, and then later a 10-drop Whitebeard that may end up coming down. However, I do draw into another Vanderdecken, so hindsight 2020, maybe I should have just pitched one. After all, I had only seen 1 that game, still 3 left in the deck, but I had seen a couple VVs already, so of course I can't get rid of that. From here, I'm just going to keep up my 6k pressure, swing at the Cavendish, swing with my leader a 6k, also restand the Cavendish, and then I can swing 8 with the Cavendish, and I'll still be able to play my Vanderdecken in order to pop this Jozu. Keeping the board clean is very helpful as it eliminates the pressure on both my life as well as my characters, and we have a Hody Jones to spare anyway. He wasn't doing any good, being no counter in our hand while we have a second one ready to go. Our opponent, with nothing left on the field, is probably going to be developing this turn. I would imagine either something like Double Marco or possibly a 10-beard. It ends up being a 10-beard. Fortunately, though, we already have another Vanderdecken in hand, and he swings 8 into our Cavendish. I'll give him the 2-1 out of my hand. Of course, my Pedro wasn't a blocker at the time, and I'll test with the 7 to see if he wants to block. I then think better of it, hey, why not just play the Hody? We have a Vanderdecken already in play, so we can just bounce that back to our hand, and I have 2 more in my hand as well if it was going to be an issue otherwise, but this way, I can still pop the Whitebeard whether he likes it or not, whether he used it to block or not, and in this case he didn't. This way I will have secured the board, put my opponent down to just 5 cards left in his hand for his turn, and I still have plenty of counter power. I guess it's about 9k counter power in hand, so there's no way that I'm going to die even to like a Roger or anything like that. And so that is going to be the game, though. Actually, he just ran out of counter power, and that's that. Our 4th and final game is up against the Mihawk deck, who does get to be a 6k leader, unfortunately, against us. We are a slash leader, and additionally, after the mulligan, our hand is not stellar. Now, our opponent gets to start with the Searcher plus his stage card, but on our side, we don't have anything to play with the Mihawk in our hand, and I'd rather not just play a naked 4k onto the board and pass, so I'll go ahead and swing 8 with the Dawn that I have. My opponent takes the life, as of course he is a 5-life leader. He's not too worried about dipping low on life against our deck, especially since we have very few rushers to threaten with. Additionally, he will be swinging a 5 and a 6 on this turn, and as for my part, since I don't have a great start, I need to take this game into late game, and so I can't afford to give up early damage. I'll need to defend with a 2-1 to stay healthy, because in the late game, this Mihawk is going to be playing some big characters to make some big swings, and I don't feel like giving a ton of cards to those. Not to mention they do have the option to play Dead Man's Game, which could stymie our blocker strategy, get rid of 2 of them for the turn that he is going to try to go for game. Additionally, he has the Law to get a Perona into play and stun the Tashigi that I was able to play on my turn 3, so it's not looking too great. I do establish another Tashigi and get a blocker into play for my turn 4, but from here, we only have 4 cards in hand, and I really only want to give up this Mihawk. I want to keep the VV plus the Vanderdecken in hand if possible. Fortunately for me, instead of going even wider on the board, our Mihawk opponent has opted to play a Shanks, which is par for the course for a Mihawk player, of course. It is a very good card. and so I'll defend the Shishigi as well as I can, give up my blocker even for it, but eventually, I just don't have the counter cards to give. But fortunately, because of this Vanderdecken, we're going to be able to swing the board back a little bit in our favor, not to mention recover some cards in hand using this Vivi. So with the Vivi in tow, we can go ahead and draw some cards up, pop his Shanks with the Vanderdecken, swing a few swings into his bodies to get even more cards out of his hand, and then pop the Vivi back into our hand for some additional card draw. Not to mention, we'll have two characters that we don't really care about in play now that we can rest for our Tashigi, so the Tashigi is very difficult to swing over as an 8k body. Now, I am willing to give up both the bodies that are the small ones, as well as a life or two this turn, because, again, we only have a 2k that we're really willing to give up right here. It's unfortunate this Cavendish is no counter power, but we may end up playing him next turn. For our opponent's part, he is just going to drop a 10 drop into play, and we don't have a way to rest it, so that is going to get a chance to swing on us on the next turn. So hopefully we will be able to clear out a couple of bodies here on our next turn. And so because I only have the 2k available to me, I am unable to block either of these attacks with counter power, and I just eat them both. So I'm at 1 life, not fantastic, but what is pretty nice is that I get this Luffy into play. I will have to bounce the Vivi back, of course, in order to restand this Tashigi so that I can continue to pressure the Perona. I'm hoping that I can get rid of it just so that I can mitigate the swings on me. I have plenty of 2Ks in my hand, so I'm probably not going to die, but the more cards I can keep in hand, the better. Not to mention, I do have a Cavendish as well. If I can somehow find a way to establish that, then I'll be able to draw even more cards on the turn after this one, just so I can continue to stall out the game even further. My opponent, for his part, is only on 3 cards left in hand, and he did let that Law go to a 6k swing, so I'm estimating he probably just has like a Dead Man's Game in hand as an event card, with some large characters left as well. So he does let the Perona go, is unable to play another 5 cost off of its on KO effect. Very nice for us. We'll just establish a blocker, put a Cavendish into play, bluff that we have an event, which we both know that we don't, but maybe he believes it. In any other event, he is going to Dead Man's Game in order to rest our blocker as well as our Dawn, and it's looking like he may be trying to push for lethal, so I will just go ahead and give all of the cards out of my hand except for this Vivi, because again, I will need this Vivi in order to recover with. Seeing that he won't be able to go for game, our opponent reconsiders what his best play will be. It looks like I was correct in ascertaining that the remaining cards in his hand are all big characters and nothing medium-sized, so instead of, playing something and also attacking into one of my bodies, he just attacks into one of my bodies and then passes the turn over. For my part, I am going to be drawing a lot of cards, trying to find our 4th and final Vanderdecken out of the deck. I have already used 3, unfortunately. I had to use them for counter power, but, I had to live as well, and getting rid of the Vivi would have meant I have a lot less draw power, so I didn't really want to do that. Fortunately, we do draw into a ton of counter power. Unfortunately, we don't draw into the Vanderdecken. So from here, we are just going to be establishing another blocker, praying that there is no Dead Man's Game, and if there is, well, we better hope that this last life is at least 1k worth of counter power, because a 13-13, 2 swings are going to be coming our way. Our opponent, he looks at his hand, which is now fully at 8 cards again, just because of taking all the life, and he plays a Perona, which is like a Dead Man's Game, but uniquely it does cost 5 instead of just 4, which does mean that I will be able to counter out of the 12k, and then his 13 that he's threatening is, well, definitely not going to be going through. However, it does mean as well I won't be able to block for either my Tashigi or my Cavendish, as I have 0 counter power left in hand, and both of my blockers are useless. Potentially, though, because I still have a life left and 2 blockers in play, it is possible that I could maybe live into another turn after this one. With 0 cards in hand, though, I'm not going to be holding my breath on that, especially since he does clear out my Cavendish. My card draw is going to be significantly reduced, and so with the Hody Jones, I'm definitely going to be pushing to try to go for the game. I'm going to go ahead and play the Hody to rest some Dawn cards, but as he doesn't cast any sort of events and just gives me a 2-1, I suspect that he probably actually doesn't have events in hand, and so a 15 plus a 6 was definitely going to be the better play here, but, I didn't know that at the time. Instead, it's going to be 8-6-8, and it just so happens to be enough. As you've seen, this deck is surprisingly solid against a lot of popular decks currently, although admittedly there are some less than stellar matchups floating around as well. Gecko Moria in particular can be a huge problem, as they are able to consistently proc Perona's stun effect multiple times per turn far earlier in the game than we can set up the 3 attackers that we need to get around it. And so with all of our attackers being 6 cost or less, it can really grind your offense to a halt. Plus, there's going to be some games where you find yourself with a starting hand that contains nothing but 2Ks and blockers just because of the sheer number that are in this deck. Consistency aside though, when everything comes together, there's very few decks that are going to be able to stop you from tearing through them. And what I really like about this leader is that this isn't the only way to even play them. There's plenty of different builds to implement. If you want to try a supernova focused package, you can definitely do that. Or maybe the East Blue stuff is more your speed. You can make that happen as well. For my part, what originally got me interested in playing this leader was that I was eager to try to find a deck that could make solid use of the new 7 cost VV plus Chocopel combo, and Zoro Sanji seemed to fit the bill. After all, you can play the VV, use the effect, get the Chocopel in play, use your leader effect in order to bounce the VV back to hand, not to mention the VV negs a card out of your opponent's hand as an on play. It all sounds very good on paper, and when I could pull it off, it was. The problem was, by the time I was getting to my 7 or 8 Dawn turn, a lot of the time I would rather just use that Dawn in order to draw cards, Dawn up my characters, or establish blockers onto the board, as I oftentimes already have 1 or 2 attackers already in play, and I needed to apply pressure and survive more so than continue to establish a wider board. I guess what I'm saying is, this leader just seems to prefer lower to the ground builds. Speaking of lower to the ground builds, there's also a Navy focused build that I was eager to try out in an attempt to abuse the OP14 Haruta, which draws a card on attack as a non-once per turn. However, the developer himself is intentionally holding this list back from greatness. When you draw a card with Haruta and have Mozambia on the board, the game sequence crashes, causing the opponent to be unable to progress the game, proving that Batsu is holding back this particular interaction as it would simply be too powerful were it allowed to be unleashed. Thankfully, Batsu has no jurisdiction over in-person games, so feel free to try this combo out in locals, but be warned that you can't play it on the sim. After everything is said and done, I think a fair placement for this deck is in the potential locals winner tier, though with the support from next set, I dare say it could honestly move up to the can win a regional tier. If you're looking for something new to try on sim or mess around with at locals, you could definitely do worse than Zoro Sanji. It's a very fun deck to play, with lots of lines to choose from during gameplay, and plenty of space in deck construction to flex your creativity. And now, as we come to the end of the video, hopefully you've come away with some ideas of your own to try out. It's a brave new world out there with lots to try, and we're getting new cards in just a month as well. Let me know in the comments below what leader you'd like to see tackled next. And if you liked what you saw, be sure to like and subscribe to see more. That's going to be it for me though. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.